we'll start with the minerals. So when you talk about minerals, what are minerals? Minerals are inorganic compounds that are required for the body as one of the nutrients, just like the vitamins. So we can classify them into two components, macro and micro. So when you call it macro, it is in excess of 100 milligram per day, while micro requires less than 100 milligram per day. Macro minerals include calcium, phosphorus, sulfur, magnesium, chloride, sodium and potassium. While out of this, chloride, sodium, potassium, these are also considered as electrolytes because they have a very powerful role in maintaining the electrolyte balance as well as maintaining the pH. While microminerals are iron, copper, zinc, molybdenum, iodine, fluoride, chromium, cobalt, manganese and selenium. So we'll just have a brief overview of each and every one in a swift manner. We'll start with the macrominerals: calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sulfur, sodium, potassium, chloride. We'll start with the sodium. Okay, it's a major extracellular cation, and these are the sources: salt, milk, drinking water, soda, soy sauce, garlic sauce, or one of the most important source nowadays, fast food. These are the maximum provider of the sodium these days. So what is the distribution? 50% is in the bomb, that is in the non-exchangeable forms, 40% in the extracellular fluid in exchangeable form, and 10% in the deposited inside the soft tissue. And out of that, total body sodium, if you are going to count, is around 4000 milliequivalent per liter. So what is the RDA? Is 1 to 5 gram per day. So if you are going to talk it, how we are going to take sodium directly? We do not take it directly, but we take it as a NaCl or regular salt, and for that we have to have around 5 to 10 grams per day as salt. Now the problem is we take far more extra amount compared to what is required for our body. So we'll talk about the metabolism, where absorption and excretion is there. Most important thing is sodium pump. So it is situated in the basal as well as lateral plasma membrane of intestinal and renal cells, where sodium continuously gets absorbed, and excretion happens through kidney as a urine, and it is prominently controlled by the aldosterone. Now when you are going to talk about excretion, we have to include skin and GI tract as well, where through skin as a sweat and through GI tract as a feces it gets excreted out. But the amount that is getting excreted is very minimal, except for the athletes, where they sweat profusely compared to the regular persons. So that's why they have a more amount going out through the sweat compared to the urine. Now blood sodium level is 135 to 145 milliequivalent per liter, while cell is very much low. So you can see the stark difference. Basically it's a major cation in the extracellular fluid. This is how we considered it as a major extracellular cation. So what are the functions? One, osmotic pressure maintenance and electrolyte balance. Also, it's a constituent of buffer and maintains the acid-base balance, helps in the absorption of glucose, galactose. It is also involved in the cell membrane permeability. So once it is getting absorbed through sodium pump, along with it, some other component will get absorbed, and that causes the permeability conditions. Now, what are the disorders which are associated with? Hypo, where your sodium level is getting lower than 130. While hypernatremia is more than 145. Remember, below 135 we do not call it as a hyponatremia, we call it hyponatremia only below 130, while normal range is 135 to 40. So what are the causes for hyponatremia? Means low sodium level, extra retention of water or loss of sodium. There are two basic causes, and below in which condition that can happen is heart failure, liver disease, nephrotic syndrome, chronic liver failure and SIADH. While loss of sodium can occur in vomiting, renal failure and Addison's disease. So what do you see in hyponatremia? One is constant thirst, muscle cramps, nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, weakness and lethargy. These are all the symptoms of hyponatremia. Why constant thirst? Because along with sodium, water is also going to go out. Also muscle, they will require continuous exclusion of the sodium pump. So if less amount of sodium is there, muscles will not be able to function. So what is the treatment? Simple, IV administration of sodium supplements like saline. You restrict the water supply or increase the salt intake, or you can provide the drugs like furosemide and anti-ADH drugs. So in a simple terms, when a person feels that there is a constant thirst, what we provide them is our one of the most simplest solution, lemon water, and this solves the purpose along with the sodium salt. Now coming to the hypernatremia, there are three basic conditions: water depletion, water and sodium depletion, and excessive sodium intake. Too much amount of sodium is being taken. Now what are the causes for water depletion? Is diabetes insipidus. For sodium and water depletion, here mellitus, sweating or diarrhea can cause, and sodium intake, too much amount of sodium retention is happening of sodium inside the body, then it is Conn syndrome or Cushing's syndrome. What you see is dehydration, hypertension and edema as a symptom. Now coming to the potassium. So there is a change. It's a major intracellular cation, not extracellular. We discussed about the extracellular cation. This is now intracellular cation. So what is the distribution? Almost 98% is in the cell, while 2% is outside the, and total body potassium is around 3500 milliequivalent. Almost 70% is inside the cellatus muscles. Inside the cells, you have almost 98%. So whatever the total 98% is there, out of 75% is inside the muscle cells of skeletal type. So what are the sources? Green leafy vegetables, beets, broccoli, banana, sweet potato, beans and avocado. If you are going to see over here, we have kept the banana as in the center. It is one of the most richest source of potassium. RDA is around 2 to 5 gram per day. You can see over here, it is coming in gram, not milligram. So it is more than 100 milligrams. So this is considered as a major mineral. So absorption happens through passive diffusion. There is no specific active transport required. While excretion, there are three routes: urine, GI tract and skin, just like the sodium. One function, maintenance of the intracellular osmotic pressure, contraction of heart, transmission of the nerve impulse. Pyruvate kinase require the potassium as a cofactor. So in some enzymes it is required as a cofactor. We are not talking about coenzyme, because coenzyme, it's an enzymatic property. Cofactor is any substance prosthetic component. Also it is required in the proper biosynthesis of the ribosome. So which factors increase the transport of potassium into the cell? Means basically it's a intracellular cation. So which components are going to increase? One is insulin, aldosterone and alkalosis. While which causes the potassium to move out of the cell? One is lack of insulin. So that's why diabetes mellitus condition is very dangerous for the potassium maintenance. Acidosis as well as severe cell damage. Any kind of cell injury will pour out the potassium. And normal blood potassium is around 3.5 to 5.3 or 5.5 milliequivalent per liter. So now talking about the hypokalemia causes, can be gastrointestinal loss, renal loss, or alkalosis itself. In alkalosis, shift of potassium from ECF to ICF will happen. Renal losses, there is a renal disease, diuretics, or Addison disease as underlying conditions. While in GI tract conditions, vomiting, diarrhea, and surgical fissura will cause the hypokalemia. What you see is muscle weakness, fatigue, and muscle cramps. There will be decreased reflexes compared to the regular physiological condition, and you will see arrhythmias or cardiac arrest. There may be tachycardia in patient. So what we will see in the hyperkalemia? Renal failure, mineralocorticoid deficiency, entry of potassium to the extracellular space, and cell damage and redistribution of potassium to extracellular space. Here you will see hyperkalemia. Now when you are going to call it as a hyperkalemia, you see more amount of potassium in extracellular fluid. You already have very high amount inside the cell, but that is not considered. For hyperkalemia, you have to have a potassium outside the cell in the extracellular fluid, and that is where you are going to call it as a hyperkalemia. So what you are going to see is fibrillation, bradycardia, cardiac arrest, ECG will be changing, and muscle weakness will be present. What you can give for hyperkalemia is IV glucose and insulin. Insulin will cause potassium to go back into the cell, and because potassium is coming out, there will be acidosis. You can provide the sodium bicarbonate to counter the acidosis. Now coming to the chloride. So what are the source? Regular table salt, milk, leafy vegetables, as well as eggs. 5 to 10 gram of chloride per day is required. So when you are going to talk about sodium, almost identical requirement is there. So whatever we are taking as a sodium table salt, we directly compensate for chloride also along with the sodium. 88% is in the ECF, 12% in the ICF, and normal body chloride is around 30 milligram per kg. Depending on the body weight, total amount will vary. What are the function? One is regulation of acid-base balance. Another is it helps in formation of hydrochloric acid inside the gastric juice, salivary amylase, pancreatic amylase. These are the enzymes which only gets activated by the chloride, and chloride shift is a phenomenon which requires chloride ions. So this is the chloride shift. This is where chloride ion will go inside the RBC. What happens is that whatever the CO2 is coming from the tissue, inside the RBC becomes the bicarbonate ion. This hydrogen atom will be removed along with the HB as a O2. Now this CO2 and HbO2, HbCO2 along with that O2 will be liberated outside. But at the same time, to compensate this carbon side outside the or coming or sending it to the lungs, chloride will come in because we have to compensate for the negativity. So plasma chloride levels are 95 to 105 milliequivalent per liter, and CSF chloride is little bit higher because the protein content, compensatory protein content is little bit lower in the CSF, so that for the compensation of positive charge and negative charge, chloride has to be little bit higher. Now absorption happens through the small intestine, and excretion happens mostly through the kidney, the urine, GI tract through feces, and through skin as a sweating. Now in the disease states, there are two: hyperchloremia, increase in serum chloride, or hypochloremia, reduction in the serum chloride. Now conditions for hyperchloremia are dehydration, respiratory acidosis, as well as Cushing syndrome. And for hypochloremia, conditions are vomiting, diarrhea, respiratory alkalosis, and excessive sweating. Now coming to the next part, that is calcium. So objectives here will be sources of RDA, metabolism, function, regulation and disorder. These are the regular component we are going to discuss in each and every mineral. And for your exam purpose, you can also do this. You just have to make a table of each and every component for each and every mineral, and you can write down in a short or brief so that you can remember easily. So one of the most abundant mineral inside the body, around 1 to 1.5 kilogram of the calcium is inside the body. These are the sources of calcium: dairy products, green leafy vegetables, salmon and sardines, fish, cereal, grains, vegetables. These are considered as the sources of calcium. What is the RDA? For children, it is very much higher because they are in a continuous growth cycle. So they have to have a higher amount of calcium. Adults require around 500, while during pregnancy and lactation, it is almost more than even children because they have to compensate for personal as well as for child as well. So metabolism of calcium, we are going to divide it into absorption factors, mechanism, excretion and distribution inside the body. Absorption is happening in the upper small intestine, and efficiency is 20 to 30% of diet is calcium. What it means is whatever the component we are going to take in the body, the food we are going to take, whatever the calcium is available in the food, only 20 to 30% of that calcium will be taken. Other than that, it will be not available. So what are the factors that can affect this 20 to 30% of uptake? So it is increased by calcitriol, PTH, high protein diet, acidic pH and bile salts, while decreased by alkaline pH, phytate oxalates, steatorrhea, vitamin D deficiency and excess phosphate in the diet. So this is how the calcium gets absorbed into the body. This is the intestinal cell. The calcium here, depending on the vitamin D3, active vitamin D3, what it is going to cause inside the gene is that it is going to generate the mRNA, which is going to generate the calcium binding protein. So whatever the calcium is coming, free calcium, that will be bound to the calcium binding protein and it will be liberated inside the cell. Without this, calcium will not cross the intestinal cell. Now talking about the excretion of the calcium. Whatever the unabsorbed calcium is there, because we already talked that only 20 to 30% is getting absorbed. So whatever the unabsorbed component is there, it is going to come through the feces. Through urine, which is processed, around 550 to 200 milligram per day will be excreted, while depending on the condition of how a person gets sweating, or if the athletes are there, it will be higher, while for a normal person it will be around 15 milligram per day. So distribution, total around 1 to 1.5 kilogram of calcium, 99% is either in bone or teeth, while only 1% is there is in the soft tissue and extracellular. And out of that total calcium, this 1% is around 9 to 11 milligram per dl. So what are the function? Formation of bone and teeth, nerve conduction, muscle contraction, activation of enzyme, blood coagulation, secretion of hormones as a second messenger, and action on myocardium. These are the major functions that calcium is going to perform. One function is regulation of enzyme activity. It activates some of the enzymes like glycogen phosphorylase kinase, amylase, PDH, IDH, while it inhibits the pyruvate kinase as well as trypsin. So total what we talked about is 9 to 11 milligram per dl calcium. Out of that, 50% means 4 to 5 milligram per dl is ionized. This is the only calcium which is available in the body for various reactions. Now these two, protein bound and complex with cation, they are not readily available for reactions. So actual working calcium in our body is very much low, 4 to 5 milligram per deciliter. So regulation by three hormones, that is calcitriol, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin, happens in three organs, that is gut or GI tract, bone and kidney. So one by one, calcitriol it increases the plasma calcium. It increases the absorption from the intestine, means increases the plasma calcium. From food, it is going to increase into the plasma. Increases the mobilization from bone and increases the renal reabsorption. So basically all this activity, it is going to increase the plasma calcium. Parathyroid hormone, it causes bone resorption and demineralization. So plasma calcium will increase, as well as renal reabsorption will be increased. So net effect is plasma calcium is going to get increased inside the body in presence of parathyroid hormone. Now coming to the calcitonin, it decreases renal reabsorption and increases the excretion of calcium. So this is a net negative hormone. It decreases the plasma calcium in the body. So how this homeostasis of blood calcium level, that 9 to 11 milligram per deciliter, is happening, let's see. So if it is higher blood calcium level, then it is going to provide the stimulus. So thyroid gland will release the calcitonin, and that calcitonin will stimulate the calcium deposition in the bone, and it reduces the uptake of calcium into the kidneys. Value will be coming down. Now homeostasis, blood calcium level, it is lower. What will happen? Falling blood calcium level will be there. So parathyroid glands will release the parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone will come out, and what it will do is it increases the calcium uptake in the intestine, increases the calcium uptake into the kidneys, and stimulate the calcium to release from the bone. And basically it will increase the blood calcium level. So this is how continuous blood calcium level is maintained inside the body. Now what are the disorders of calcium metabolism? One is hypocalcemia and hypercalcemia. Cause, features and treatment. What are the causes? One will be the inadequate intake, impaired absorption, you do not have calcium binding proteins, maybe increased excretion, effect of the calcitonin, magnesium deficiency, or acute pancreatitis. What you will see is muscle cramps and tetany, laryngospasm as well as convulsions, cardiac arrhythmias. Most prominent feature is prolongation of QT interval. On longer term, you will see, means in chronic hypocalcemia, you are going to see the cataract. So what are the signs of tetany? Chostak signs. So contraction of facial muscle in response to a tapping of the facial nerve. Instant contraction will occur. You can see over here, this is the facial nerve path. We just tapped it and image shows that contraction has happened. Another is Trousseau's sign. It's a carpal spasm that is occurring after the occlusion of the brachial artery with BP cuff. These are the major two signs of having a tetany, hypocalcemia. What we can do is we can provide the calcium gluconate, and for asymptomatic cases, calcium carbonate and vitamin D can be provided. What are the causes, features and treatment? For hypercalcemia, causes are increased intake, increased absorption, decreased excretion, and there can be malignancy. Features will be metastatic calcification, neurological symptoms, renal symptoms, GI symptoms, and cardiac arrhythmias. What we can do, we can provide the treatment for the underlying primary disease, or we can provide the natriuresis, induction of natriuresis, or we can directly provide the calcitonin hormone. Now coming to the phosphorus. So again, sources: RDA, metabolism, function and disorders. These are the sources. Various components are shown: milk, cereals, nuts, fish. These are the major sources for the phosphorus and meat. What is the RDA? Here it is 800 milligram per day. Remember, for adults you have to take calcium and phosphorus in ratio of 1:1, while for children it is almost double. So because children require more amount of calcium for their growing bones, the ratio is little bit higher. It gradually lowers down, and for adults, once achieves adulthood, it comes to the 1:1. So for adults, requirement is around same as phosphorus. So metabolism, absorption, excretion, and what are the factors? Absorption happens in the upper small intestine. So now you can see here the efficiency is almost more than doubled compared to the calcium, that is 70%. So less amount of phosphorus in diet is required compared to the calcium, that is total required. So what are the factors? Bile salt, acidity, parathyroid hormone and calcium. These are going to increase the absorption, while high calcium phosphate ratio, phytates, alkalinity, these are going to decrease the absorption. So excretion is urine is going to, whatever the phosphate is being taken, 2/3 is coming out into the urine, means around 0.6 gram or 600 milligram per day. Stools, whatever the component that we not able to absorb, that is coming out, and PTH is the only hormone that is going to affect the renal excretion over here. So what are the function? One is formation of bone and teeth, high energy compounds. Remember, every kind of high energy compound, including ATP and we require phosphate in the mixture, along with the DNA RNA synthesis, coenzyme, phospholipids, phosphorylation reaction, and ultimately it's a acid base balance. So in a term, phosphorus is required for each and every kind of process that is happening inside our body. So maintenance is vital for us. Distribution is around 80% in the bone and teeth, while 20% is in the other tissues. And plasma phosphorus, which is free, that is around 3 to 4 milligram per deciliter. For children, condition will be little bit higher. Therefore, phosphorus levels are little bit higher, that is 5 to 6 milligram per deciliter. So regulation happens through 3 hormones, again just like the calcium: active vitamin D3, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. So active vitamin D3 increases the absorption, increases the mobilization and increases the renal reabsorption. So in a net, it increases the plasma phosphorus. PTH decreases the renal reabsorption and increases the excretion. So ultimately, totally, it decreases the plasma phosphorus, while calcitonin, it blocks the bone reabsorption and renal reabsorption is also decreased. So it totally decreases the plasma phosphorus value. Disorders of plasma phosphorus metabolism can be two-way: hypophosphatemia and hyperphosphatemia. So for hypophosphatemia, what are the causes? One is decrease in intake, decrease in absorption, maybe due to malabsorption, or there is a increase loss. And what you can see, there are two conditions: acute or chronic. In acute condition, hemolytic anemia, leukocytic dysfunction or platelet dysfunction may be there, while in chronic conditions, anorexia, weakness, fractures, these are the features that you can see. What can be done? We can directly provide the phosphate into the patient. Now coming to the hyperphosphatemia, increased absorption, decreased renal excretion and hemolysis. These are the major causes of hyperphosphatemia. What we will see is soft tissue calcification, means not only bones but even soft tissue will be hardened. What can be done is, if you have a renal failure, you can provide dialysis or you can provide the aluminum hydroxide. Now coming to the magnesium. So again, sources are RDA, distribution, function and disorders. Sources are nuts, cereals, seafoods and vegetables. It requires around 300 to 400 milligram per day. So what is the distribution? Total is around 25 gram. Out of that, 67% is in bone, while 32% inside the cell. And extracellular magnesium is around 1%, and that is amounting to around 1.8 to 2.5 milligram per deciliter. So what are the functions? It is required for healthy bones and teeth. It required for the parathyroid hormone secretion. So for maintenance of calcium as well as phosphorus, you require PTH, and for PTH you require enough amount of magnesium. Also helps in the muscle nerve function, and it's an activator of various kind of enzyme. What can be the disorders? Hypomagnesemia and, there is a typo, hypo and hypermagnesemia. Now what happens into the hypomagnesemia? Malnutrition, alcoholism, malabsorption, tubular acidosis, or drugs like diuretics. These are the causes for hypomagnesemia. What you will see is muscle cramps, tetany, cardiac arrhythmias and ataxia and tremor. Hypermagnesemia, chronic renal failure and rhabdomyolysis. What you will see is muscle weakness and hypotension. Now coming to the sulfur. What are the sources? Sulfur containing amino acid like cysteine, cysteine and methionine, plant proteins, animal proteins and legumes. These are the sources like meat, fish, egg, cheese, tea, coca, dried apricots. So excretion is happening as a sulfate ion by kidney in the urine, 80% in the form of inorganic sulfate, 10% in the form of organic or ethereal sulfate, and 10% in the form of neutral or unoxidized sulfate. What are the function? It is a constituents of protein, vitamins, gags, bile acid, glutathione, helps in activation of various enzymes and detoxification processes. So this completes our macro minerals. Now coming to the micro minerals: iron, copper, zinc, molybdenum, iodine, fluoride, chromium, cobalt, manganese and selenium. So we'll start with the copper. Sources: RDA, metabolism, function and disorder. So these are the sources of the copper: liver, meat, cereals, nuts, kidneys, egg, vegetables. Requirement is around 2 to 3 milligram per day. Now we have come down to below of 100 milligram per day. So this is micro mineral. So absorption occurs again in the upper small intestine and efficacy is around 10%, which is very much lower. So we have to take much amount of copper to compensate for the copper absorption. Transport happens through ceruloplasmin and copper albumin complex. Remember, phytates, oxalates, zinc, molybdenum, these are going to be the decreasing the copper uptake. Now plasma copper is around 100 to 200 microgram per deciliter. Out of total plasma copper, 90% is bound to the ceruloplasmin, 10% is bound to albumin, and normal ceruloplasmin is around 20 to 50 milligram per deciliter. What are the function? Here the copper is a component of various enzymes. Ceruloplasmin helps in iron transport. Tyrosinase, which is required for biosynthesis of melanin. Lysyl oxidase helps in collagen biosynthesis. Cytochrome oxidase in the ETC. Tryptophan pyrrolase happens in the catabolism. Superoxide dismutase as an antioxidant. Dopamine hydroxylase, catecholamine synthesis, and ALA synthase, the heme synthesis. These are all the enzymes which are going to be utilizing the copper. Now what happens in the copper deficiency? What are the causes? Malnutrition, absorption, malabsorption and nephrotic syndrome. Now features are anemia, cardiac failure, hypopigmentation, osteoporosis and joint deformities. Toxicity: if you are going to take excessive amount of copper or there is a Wilson's disease, what you will see is nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, renal dysfunction as well as cirrhosis. And these are the two major inborn errors of copper metabolism. One is Menkes syndrome, another is Wilson's disease. It's a rare and inherited as a sex-linked recessive disorder. There is a mutation in the gene that codes for the copper binding protein inside the intestinal cells. So copper is not getting transported properly from mucosal cell to blood. So total absorption of copper is decreased. What you will see is anemia, depigmentation, growth failure, mental retardation as a various effects. So you can see over here image, these are the patients with the Menkes syndrome. Now coming to the Wilson's disease, another autosomal recessive disorder. It is caused by the mutation in the gene that is coding for the copper binding protein inside the liver cell. So there is a defect in transport of copper and secretion of ceruloplasmin from the liver. So copper is accumulated inside the liver and other tissue. In Menkes syndrome, there was a problem with the absorption coming from the intestinal cell. Here transport is not happening and accumulation inside the liver is. So these are the features that you will see: hepatomegaly, jaundice, acute hepatitis, renal dysfunction, cardiac conditions, Kaiser-Fleischer rings. This is the major feature of the Wilson's disease. Hemolysis, rickets, these are the conditions that is going to happen. So accumulation happens in various components and causing the copper toxicosis. What you will see is neurological symptoms, cirrhosis, damage and Kaiser-Fleischer rings. Basically it's a brown pigmentation around the iris not whole eye, only around the iris at the edge. You can see over here, this is the Kaiser Fleischer ring, this component. Now coming to the iron, one of the most essential trace elements. So sources: RDA, metabolism function disorders. These are the sources: green leafy vegetables, eggs, pulses, liver meat, jaggery, cereals. Remember, milk is a very poor source of the iron. So requirement for adults is around 10 to 20 milligram per day. For pregnant and postmenopausal women, it is increased because the physiological loss is more. Iron metabolism: absorption, transport, storage, and excretion. Absorption occurs in the small intestine in the form of heme or non-heme, which will be either ferrous or ferric iron, and efficiency again is very much low, 10% only. Now, iron is considered as a one-way structure. It is absorbed and excreted only from small intestine. There is no other way. Once it is reaches inside the body, there is no way coming out from the other sources. So only you go have a single door for entry and exit for iron. So what are the factors affecting iron absorption? Ferrous form, ascorbic acid, vitamin C, cysteine, and hydrochloric. So basically acidic environment causes the increased absorption. Decreasing phytate phosphates, antacid or alkaline condition, and GI diseases. So how it happens is the mucosal block theory, how it is regulated. So let's see. So you have a three component. One is your lumen, this is mucosal cell, and this is the circulation part inside the blood. So what is going to happen is whatever the food we are going to take, ferric iron is coming out. It is either bound to protein or acids. Inside the stomach, in the presence of hydrochloric acid, this ferric iron along with the vitamin C and cysteine gets converted into ferrous form. That only can be absorbed. So if you have ferric iron, there is no way it is going to get directly absorbed. Once it is reaching the mucosal cell, in the presence of peroxidase again gets converted back into the ferric form. Here apoferritin will come, gets converted into ferritin. That is the storage form inside the mucosal cell, or it is directly absorbed to the circulation. Here along with ceruloplasmin gets converted into ferric form, and through transferrin it is going into the different tissue. So ferrous form is very much important. Here the ferritin will provide when there is a no amount of iron coming from the food. So storage of iron occurs in the liver, intestine, spleen, and bone marrow, and form is either ferritin or hemosiderin. Excretion is very much little, around 1 milligram per day. Through stool is around 0.7, and if there is a physiological loss like menstruation, there is going to be very much high amount that is going to the blood loss. What are the function? So various component. One we can just simply say is hemoglobin, but it's a part of heme compound, and another non-heme compounds. So heme compounds, if you can remember, hemoglobin, myoglobin, cytochrome, catalase. This is where iron is deposited inside the heme and they are going to function. While succinate dehydrogenase, xanthine oxidase, iron sulfur protein, these are the non-heme compounds where iron is incorporated. So disorders is iron deficiency, another is iron excess. Deficiency, what you will see is pallor, dizziness, palpitation, pica, fatigue, and major sign will be microcytic hypochromic anemia. In iron overload, there are two conditions, hemosiderosis and hemochromatosis. So what happens in hemosiderosis? Iron stores as a hemosiderin are increased. There is no associated tissue injury. While in hemochromatosis, iron is deposited in the various tissues directly, and that can lead to the tissue injury. So in chromatosis, cirrhosis can happen. For pancreas, there can be fibrotic damage, in pigmentation, hypothyroidism, arthritis, as well as arrhythmia. These are the features that will happen in the hemochromatosis. Now coming to the zinc. Okay, what are the sources? Grains, nuts, shellfish, beans, and meat. RDA is around 10 milligram per day. Absorption happens in the upper small intestine and efficacy around 10 to 15%. Calcium, phosphate and phytates, these are the factors which are going to decrease the zinc absorption. So less amount of these components will increase the zinc absorption. Distribution is total amount is around 2 gram. Out of that 60% is in the muscles, 30% in the bone and prostate, liver and brain. What are the functions? Component of various metalloenzymes. There is a difference between metal activated and metallo. It's a inbuilt component in the metalloenzymes. Integrity of skin, growth reproduction, insulin stabilization. This is one of the major function of zinc. Component of transcription factor, immune function, wound healing, and it's a component of gestalt. So what happens in the zinc deficiency? Causes are malnutrition, malabsorption, nephrotic syndrome or chronic alcoholism. And what you will see is hypogonadism, impaired spermatogenesis, growth failure, loss of taste sensation, skin lesion such as dermatitis. What happens in the toxicity? Mostly seen in the welders due to zinc oxide fumes. There will be excess salivation, nausea, vomiting, pancreatitis and anemia. Now coming to the iodine. Sources: RDA, metabolism, function and deficiency. Sources are seafoods, dairy products, drinking water, egg, iodized salt, vegetables. RDA is around 150 microgram per day. Absorption happens in the upper small intestine. Transport occurs in through the proteins. Storage is major portion in the thyroid gland, and whatever we have absorbed, out of that 2/3 is excreted into the urine. Major function is synthesis of thyroid hormones, that is T3 and T4. Deficiency causes are dietary deficiency, means iodine is not being able to be ingested, or there can be goitrogens like thiocyanates, thiourea, cabbage, cauliflower. Cretinism is a very prominent feature of iron deficiency in the children. You can see the features in the patients, or in adults you will see the goiter, enlargement of the thyroid gland. What can be the treatment? We can provide potassium iodide, or this has been a very successful formula in the India, is the iodized salt. It has been made mandatory by the government. So whatever the salt that you have to provide or sell is to be iodized first, and then only manufacturer can sell the salt. So this helps in regular maintenance of the iodine level. Now the problem is that for Gujarati people, what we do is that we put the salt beforehand we make the food, and that causes the problem with the iodine. It's a vaporable component, so make sure you generate or you make the food without salt and then at the end provide the salt. This way your iodine is maintained into the food, otherwise it is going to go away. Now coming to the fluorine. Sources: RDA, function, deficiency and toxicity. Sources is the drinking water exclusively, depends on the fluorine content inside the soil, and requirement is around 1 to 2 parts per million. Because it is coming from water, it will be required very less, around 1.5 to 4 milligram per day. What are the function? It helps in hardness of bone and teeth. Normal dentition is required in normal dentition, and it prevents the dental caries. So what are the causes for deficiency? Your water is low in fluorine. That's why most of the time if you are going to see that many doctors will not advise the RO water, because it is completely going to remove the component of fluorine along with the other impurity. What you will see is dental caries, the deficiency. Toxicity: fluorine content that is more than 5 parts per million. Too much amount of dental will be there, fluorosis will be there, and skeletal fluorosis will be seen. Dental fluorosis, what you will see is mottling of enamel and discoloration of teeth. There will be small pigments, black pigments on the teeth. While skeletal fluorosis features are bowed legs, osteoporosis. You can see over here, this is the dental fluorosis, and this is after treatment. Skeletal fluorosis, the osseous membrane inside the bone, here the calcification will happen. Regular joint, there will be joint lockup. Here damage to the spinal vertebra will be happening. This is the regular and this is the calcification. Now coming to the selenium, seafoods, meat, liver, kidney and plants. These are the sources. RDA is around 50 to 200 microgram per day. Now we are right now very low. This is coming in the microgram. So absorption occurs in the upper small intestine through plasma protein. It is bound, and excretion happens in the urine only. The functions, it's a component of glutathione peroxidase, which is working as an antioxidant, deiodinase that converts T4 to T3, selenocysteine, we considered it as a 21st amino acid and is in a anti-cancer drugs, can work as an antioxidant. So what or how this selenocysteine component is there? So what happens is that lipid peroxide, there will be a tissue damage, disintegration. Here vitamin E comes into the action, and this vitamin E component, this glutathione peroxidase, is going to work in the presence of selenium only. That will convert or oxidize the glutathione reduced form into the oxidized form. Okay, so this is how your glutathione converts or blocks the peroxidation of the various tissues. Deficiency cause the Cashans disease, low soil content and parenteral nutrition may be there. Features is muscular dystrophy, loss of appetite, nausea and cardiomyopathy. So this is dilated cardiomyopathy, restricted cardiomyopathy, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and that can be caused by the selenium. Toxicity is very rare and normally seen in the people who are regularly exposed to the metal polish and anti-rust compound. There is hair loss and dermatitis in the selenium toxicity. Now coming to the manganese. These are the sources: whole grain cereals, vegetables, nuts. Total requirement is around 5 milligram per day. Functions are pyruvate carboxylase, which helps in gluconeogenesis, acetyl coenzyme carboxylase, which helps in fatty acid synthase, and superoxide dismutase, which is going to suppress the stress that is caused by the ROS. So here manganese is utilized as a cofactor. Coming to the molybdenum, these are the sources is milk, beans and cereals, and RDA is around 200 microgram per day. Two major enzymes which requires the molybdenum, xanthine oxidase and sulfite oxidase. So catabolism of purines, which is the major function of xanthine oxidase, and sulfite to sulfate is a function of sulfite oxidase. Coming to the cobalt, liver, pancreas and vitamin B12, these are the sources, and RDA is around 1 microgram per day. Function is a component of vitamin B12 and the form of methylcobalamin and hydroxycobalamin, it is working as a component. Coming to the chromium, sources are beaver's roots, molasses, meat products, cheese, whole grain, and requirement is around 0.5 to 20 milligram per day. So these are the functions: helps in utilization of glucose, facilitates the binding of insulin, lowers the total cholesterol, decreases LDL and increases HDL. So with this, we complete the brief overview of discussion on the minerals.